Hey everyone, welcome to Munich. We're actually here for the BMW launch of the Neue Klasse, but I had to come here to test a new car as well. And I'm in the BMW Garching facility where they have a press fleet here, and there are quite a few options. So I'm gonna take you through a quick tour before I show you which car I'm gonna drive today. So let's start off. We have an M3 CS in signal green. Definitely one of my top choices to drive today. There is an X5M competition. Of course, I can get that one in the US, so maybe we'll skip that one. Another M3 CS, signal green as well. There is another M3 CS in Brooklyn gray, so that's a good choice right there. M2, of course, I drove that one before. But what about this one? M3 Touring in Portimao blue. If you look inside, it also has the carbon bucket seat, so that one looks pretty nice actually. So maybe this one, or maybe that one. Let's see this one. Isle of Man green M3 Touring. How about this one? Black interior, so beautiful. This spec is amazing. Let's move on. Have an i7 here. Drove this one before, a great car, but we'll skip it for now. How about this beast? M4 CSL, look at this one. Amazing looking car, especially in black. Definitely my favorite choice on the color on the M4 CSL. So let me think. All right, let's walk and take a look at one more thing. You also get a quick look behind the scenes of what happens when you go to pick up a car. Of course, there's some other journalists here as well. They're doing the same thing, so hopefully they're not gonna take my car right now. So let's see what we have here. Of course, XM, always a good choice, but maybe I can drive this one in the US, so we'll skip it for now. Another Marina Bay Blue XM, but I think I might have found my car actually. Let's see if this is my car. Oh yeah, this is the one. Look at this one. M3 Touring in Brooklyn gray. This is why I actually wanted to take the day off today and drive this car. So the plan is to take it out on some of the scurvy roads around Munich and see what it can do. And of course, it's probably gonna make me a little bit jealous because we still can't get this one in the US. Nonetheless, I'm gonna have a chance to really test it today. So don't go anywhere, let's go for a drive. Since it's based on the 3 Series Touring, of course they had to make some adjustments to the chassis and also to the overall body structure and rigidity. So let's start with that, especially in comparison to the M3 sedan. So according to BMW, they have new rear dampers in the rear, and of course the front has been calibrated a little bit differently to handle the longer body of the M3 Touring. Now, if we're talking about additional stiffness, there is a brace that was integrated right before the exhaust, and that's gonna give the rear end a lot more stability and especially a lot more rigidity. Of course, under the hood, it comes with all the braces that the regular M3 and M4 have, so I do expect the front end to be quite responsive and extremely sharp, especially if you're going into some of these corners where you can push the car. You can see the car is actually extremely composed. There is not a lot of body roll, and I don't even think that I'm actually in the full sport mode. So the overall driving experience really feels like just a normal M3 and M4, despite being a little bit heavier. The car does have a similar character. Of course, you know the engine by now. It's the popular S58. It's the workhorse of the M brand right now. And it's a fantastic unit, especially when you pair this one with the ZF 8-speed, because as much as I enjoy the 6-speed manual in some cars like the new M2 and of course in the M3 and M4, I do love the character of the engine a lot more with the new ZF because it's been fine-tuned to handle that additional power and especially that torque. So you're getting a very low RPM band and you can feel that immediately. I mean, there is a little bit of lag, but once you hit that RPM band around 2000, then it's really starting to push you forward quite fast. Now let's switch a little bit into the sport mode to have an idea how the car changes. Just like all the other BMWs, you can go from comfort to sport and sport plus. Naturally, if you're driving in a city center, I always recommend going in comfort, so you're not getting too much bounciness. But if you're in Germany, for example, here, and you get a chance to go up the mountain or down the mountain and into some of those corners, it's always nice to have some additional stiffness and a lot more response from the engine. So from that perspective, I don't expect the car to be a lot different than a regular M3. In the end, it's got a similar character, but of course it's interesting to see how the additional weight will feel if you're pushing the car hard. I don't remember the exact figures on how much heavier it is. It can't be too much either. In the end, they're really based on the same chassis and all of that, despite being a little bit wider and longer. I don't expect that weight penalty to be significant in order for you to actually feel that. Of course, if you're a pro driver and you go on the track, you might see those differences, but I'm assuming a lot of people that buy the M3 Touring here, they're not going to go and track the car, they're going to use the M3 for that. So this is really just a fancy and fast family hauler for somebody that doesn't want to buy an SUV and they just want a super fun and versatile car. Now I'm in the Sport Plus mode actually for all the settings, the engine, the chassis, the steering and the brake. The car is a lot more aggressive, and once again, just like all the other new BMWs, you're getting this wider gap in between the driving modes. So if you start in comfort, the car will be a lot more domesticated. It's a better daily driver clearly, but if you go into Sport and Sport Plus, really that gap is quite wide, because the idea here is to have a dual character car, something that you can take to the track if you want to, or you can just drive comfortably during longer road trips. So you're getting a lot more response from the engine. The throttle has changed quite a bit as well. A lot more responsive, especially if you try to floor it quickly. The ZF transmission can be adjusted as well, so it can be more aggressive or less aggressive based on what you want. And the same thing with the pedal feel, you can adjust that with the two different settings. Every journalist tends to focus quite a bit on the steering feedback. It's an important thing that we like to cover in every car review, because maybe the old school reviewers have always done that, so we tend to do the same thing. So I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. I don't have the M3 sedan to compare them back to back, but overall I feel like it's pretty much the same thing. I don't feel a huge difference between the cars, or if any difference. It's the same steering that can be a little bit dead center on, but once again you can fix that a little bit more if you go into the Sport and Sport Plus. It becomes a little bit more twitchy, I would say. You don't have to manhandle it as much as you would in the comfort mode, but overall you're never going to get the same feeling that you would get, for example, from the electromechanical system that you would have in the E92 M3 or I have in my 1M. I'm not complaining about this, because sometimes when I drive my car I feel like I have to fight that steering a little bit too much. It is a lot twitchier and a lot harder to handle, especially in city centers, in stop-and-go traffic. So by now I'm definitely used to the new steering that BMW has, the electric steerings that they have. Because it has the MX drive, you can decouple the front wheels from the back. So you could essentially turn this one into a full rear wheel drive. It's not always recommended because it does have a lot of power and a lot of torque, so you have to be really careful, because the car can step out on you, especially if you deactivate some of the nanny controls. It can get you in trouble quickly. But that's the beauty of this car, just like the regular M3 and M4, because you can have a lot more fun if you want to. You can spin those rear tires and wheels quite a bit, especially if you go into some of these twisties here. Unfortunately, I can't do it right now. Speaking of spinning that rear end, it does come with the LSD, the limited slip differential, and just like in all the other BMWs, it behaves in a similar way. It helps you control the wheels and tires individually, and that's going to help especially with cornering, entering and exiting the corners without stepping out of the road. The configuration setup, it's exactly the same that you would expect in an M3, so you can have the M1 and M2 buttons pre-configured to your exact settings that you would want. And of course, if you want to have a lot more fun, it does come with the M traction control adjustment, which will allow you to spin the wheels a lot more than in the regular mode. As always, I don't recommend to go fully off with the DSC. I would definitely do NDM if you want to have fun with the car, and because once again, it's a quite long wheelbase, and it can get you in trouble quickly if you're not used to the car. It is a lot more controllable than the previous generation F80 and F82, and that's something that I experienced also in the regular M3 and M4. Of course, there was never an F83 or F84, M3 Touring, but overall the character of the entire generation of M3 and M4, it's a lot different. The F80 was always the more playful, the more joyful car. It allowed you to have a lot more fun on the road, especially, and you could feel all time that there were not that many nanny controls included in the package. Of course, with the new generation M3 and M4, and now with the first M3 Touring, you are getting a more composed car, a more balanced car in many ways. It's a car that you feel like you can get behind the wheel and be a fast driver immediately. You don't need to learn the car too much. Sometimes the overconfidence might not be good for you because you feel like you're invincible and you can get in trouble quickly. But overall, you should be able to be a better driver with this car, especially since you have the 8-speed automatic and you don't need to worry too much about rolling your own gears, and you can just focus on the road. So since I'm in stop and go traffic, actually, let me pull over and let's talk about the design of the car. And I'm going to show you the exterior, of course, and I'm going to talk about the interior design and the cargo space. So don't go anywhere. Alright, so now let's talk about the design of the BMW M3 Touring. First time that I've seen the car was actually last year at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and my first impression was quite positive because for some reason, even though I'm not a huge fan of the kidney grille on the new M3 and M4, it does fit the M3 Touring a lot better. Maybe it's that placebo effect because we can't get the M3 Touring in the US. Maybe that's why I like it a little bit more than the regular M3 sedan and the coupe. But for some reason, it also fits a lot better with the extended design of the M3 Touring. But we're going to talk about that when we go to the side. So once again, at the front, no difference there compared to the regular M3 sedan or the M4 coupe. But of course, this one does come with a few upgrades, and it starts with the optional carbon fiber package. And of course, because of that, you are getting those carbon fiber inserts right there into the air curtains. And of course, you have this piano black painted front spoiler. I wish that was carbon fiber as well because it would look a lot better. Of course, it's a press car, so BMW always decides to put a lot of things on the car, and it starts with the laser lights right there. And even though they don't offer this on other models today, they do offer it on the M3 competition. So that's the front end, really no difference there compared to the regular M3 and M4. Maybe some tiny details in between the M3 competition and the regular M3 with the rear wheel drive non-competition. Now let's talk about the side view because of course this is my favorite view on the M3 Touring, and you can see it right here. As I said earlier, it just works a lot better with the front end of the car being so aggressive because the side view, it's equally aggressive. And of course you have this really nice roofline right here with the extended spoiler on top. It's just a beautiful view. Honestly, if you go back a little bit, you can really see the car in all of its beauty. It's also aided by the fact that it's got the Brooklyn gray color, which tends to accentuate the body lines of the car. And you can see right here, you have this character line, they call it the Ziegler line, that runs across the car all the way in the back. And that kind of separates visually the top section of the car from the bottom one, and it also makes it look a little bit lower to the ground. Of course, you've got another nice, interesting line running across from the back all the way down there, and that one is paired actually with this rocker panel. Of course, it's piano black painted. I'm not sure if you can spec that with carbon fiber, but I think it will look really, really good. So overall, some interesting shapes from the side, and that's what makes the M3 Touring so special. So once again, let's just take a look back and look at this view. As you can see, the proportions are perfect for the M3 Touring. Of course, it's quite spacious. It has a lot of trunk space, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Now, it does come with carbon ceramic brakes, optional of course. You can spec it normally with the M Sport, no difference from the regular M3 and M4. 19-inch at the front, 275, 285. You can see an all black wheel design. But of course, you can also spec this one with Cup 2 tires if you want to go to the track. I definitely recommend those. They're quite sticky. For normal driving, the Michelin PS4S are ideal. So now let's go to the back and talk about the rear end design. Of course, it's your typical 3 Series Touring, of course, M3 Touring design. And it's always going to look kind of the same because it really is a practical car. This is a versatile car that's supposed to be a family car that can go really, really fast. And I had a chance to push this one on the Autobahn, and it is quite fun to drive. So, bold design from the back. You can see the really broad shoulders. I mean, you can see how far they extend out those hips. Looks massive. Of course, you can also see the Roof spoiler standing out quite a bit, very aerodynamic. Once again, I wish this one was also made out of carbon fiber. Speaking of carbon fiber, you're not able to actually get a carbon fiber roof on the M3 competition. I remember talking to the product manager last year in Goodwood, and he has to do something with a production line where the M3 and M4 are being made. They would have to adjust it in order to be able to offer a carbon fiber roof on the M3 competition. So unfortunately, you're only getting this piano black painted option. Once again, typical L-shaped BMW lights. Of course, by now you've seen the BMW Neue Klasse, which moves away from the traditional L-shape, but it's still on the M3 Touring. Same goes for the quad pipes, massive. I believe they're 110 millimeters in size, naturally 4 of them. And then you have this beautifully sculpted carbon fiber diffuser. If you look to the side, you got some more rocker panels right here, and it just gives the car a very sporty look from the back. So once again, this is probably my favorite view on the M3 Touring, aside from the side view, because you can really see how massive and how aggressive this car is. And once again, it makes me jealous of all these European customers that are able to buy the M3 competition Touring, because this is a very popular car today. According to BMW, they're selling every single one of them, and the production just kind of keep going because they're actually being able to sell these cars quite well. So now let's talk about the interior space. So it's a BMW M3 Touring. Naturally, you gotta have a lot of space inside, because that's why you're picking the M3 Touring over the M3 sedan. So let's take a look at that. Oh, here's my co-driver. I was looking for you.
Hi.
Good nap?
Yes.
Plenty of space?
Oh yeah.
Should I get you out of here?
Please.
All right, give me 1 second. So let's see the space if we open up the trunk fully. And as you can see, it's quite spacious. I mean, I guess the idea was really to see that anybody can actually fit in there. So naturally you can fit a lot of bags because it's a spacious car. It's a family car in the end. And you can see, right, I don't remember exactly the specs on the cargo space, but you can see compared to the M3 sedan, you have a lot more room there. Of course, there are some features specific to the M3 Touring. For example, you have this, I'm not sure what they're calling them, but essentially they're supposed to hold the bags in place. They're made out of this rubber in the center right there. So that's the idea there. If you place your carry-ons or any other baggage, you'll be able to hold it in place. Of course, it comes with this retractable cover right there. You can actually detach this from right here, and you can actually store it in this space. So very practical if you want to get more upwards room. Of course, if you have a dog or any other pet, you can actually raise this up so you can separate yourself from your pets in the back, so they're not going to jump into the rear seat. There is an additional space right there, and if you want to have access to the toolkit, you can actually put this thing right there. Very unique. And of course, you can take your toolkit out and keep it open, maybe even store a few small things in there. So overall, very practical car. Of course, there's some little details that make a difference. Of course, you can also lower the rear bench from there, from both sides. And that's going to give you additional cargo room. So with that being said, let's go take a look inside, because naturally you will have a lot more room in this car than you will have in the M3 sedan or the M4 coupe. Let's go take a look. All right, so inside the M3 Touring competition, of course, you can see immediately this doesn't have the carbon bucket seats. You do have the option to get a carbon bucket seat if you want to, but in my case, if this was my daily driver, I would highly recommend getting the M Sport seats. They're good enough. They have really nice side support as well. It's exactly what you expect to see from an M Sport seat in an M car. If you want to go more on the sporty side, of course, the carbon bucket seats are really nice. They're just not ideal, in my case, for very long drives. Overall, it's exactly the same design that you would see in the M3 sedan and the M4 coupe. Of course, you got plenty of piano black trims all over. You can spec the car with carbon fiber trim if you want to. It's an additional option. And speaking of the additional options, you don't have the option to get a 6-speed manual, unfortunately, in the M3 Touring, because it only comes in the competition spec. And because of the additional torque available for that, you can get a 6-speed manual, so you're only going to get the 8-speed automatic from ZF. Not an issue really. It's still a family car. It's not something that maybe you want to run in your own gears all the time. Of course, iDrive 8 with a curved display, same as you're getting right now in the regular M3 and M4. We've talked about this. Every single video I got to touch on this. It's not ideal because now you're controlling everything from the screen. You're losing a lot of the physical buttons, but if you've been watching my videos for the last few months or maybe a couple of years, you would know that I've been complaining about this quite a bit. M Sport steering wheel, exactly no difference compared to the other M3 and M4 variants. M1 and M2 buttons. You need that if you want to pre-configure your settings. But other than that, really no difference whatsoever compared to the M3 sedan, for example. But I guess if we go to the back seat, we might be able to see if we have a lot more room than the M3 sedan, which we should. So let's go just check it out quickly. All right, so rear seating in the M3 Touring. So let me start first with my height. I'm about 6'3" tall, which comes out to about 1.9 meters tall. And as you can see, there is room, but not a lot of room actually. So my front seat, it's been adjusted to my driving position, yet I'm still able to touch a little bit the front seat. Of course, it does have a nice sculpture in there to give you some additional inches, maybe a couple of inches of knee room. But overall, if you're on the tall side and you have a very tall driver, you might be struggling a little bit with the knee space. Lateral space, no issue at all. You can definitely travel with 3 people, ideally just 2. And if you're looking at the headroom right here, I have about maybe 5 inches here, maybe about 10 centimeters, maybe a little bit lower than that, but plenty of headroom space. You can see I can lay back and even more than that. So not extremely spacious, but definitely a little bit more spacious than in the M3 sedan and definitely more spacious than in the M4 Coupe. So that's the rear seating, no changes here whatsoever compared to the M3 sedan. Of course, you can lower this armrest right there, very practical. You got 2 USB-C ports right there if you want to plug in your devices, and of course you can control the AC from here as well. So with that being said, that's a quick overview of the design of the new BMW M3 Touring. I'm gonna go back behind the wheel and continue our drive. So let's go take a look. All right, so back to the driving portion. A lot more fun than talking about the design, of course. It's important to some people, so I had to cover that. But let's talk about the driving dynamics once again. So maybe you can see in the footage a little bit how dynamic the car really is. You don't need to push it too much in order to get going. The car is really composed. You don't feel that body roll almost at all. If you enter the corner, it's quite sticky. Of course, it's a combination of the Michelin PS4S tires, but also because of the MX drive system. Those two in combination with really perfect weather today, it will make the asphalt feel really sticky with the car, and that's exactly what I'm experiencing. So that's probably a combination also of the rear setup that's different than from the M3 sedan, and probably because of the additional brace there that makes the car to feel more composed and more rigid. Now the front end, of course, turning in, it's always interesting in a car of this size because you might expect a little bit of understeer, but honestly at the speeds that I was going to, I didn't really feel that. I will probably have to push the car on a track to see if I can understeer the front end and if there is enough bite. And I usually care about that, especially when I go on curvy roads, because it does allow me to enter a corner a lot later. I don't have to perfect the line. I don't have to brake in time in order to get in or exit properly. So I always like to test the cars that way, because in the end, not everybody is a pro driver. Not everybody knows when to brake properly, when to lift up the gas pedal or the brake pedal in order to have a perfect exit. So let's say you're a newbie when it comes to fast driving, you can definitely push this car to its limit in a corner, and maybe you don't need to be the perfect driver in order to exit that without getting in trouble and spinning out of the road. But in the end, I truly believe that people that buy this car, they really buy it because it's a fun car, but at the same time, they value quite a bit the space inside the car, the versatility of the car, and this is a car that you can use to transport a lot of gear with you. You can take your mountain bike or any other bike with you, or any other golf clubs, for example, and you can take this one on long road trips with your family. There is plenty of room for 5 people in the car, and of course, plenty of luggage, as you've seen. You know, we've played that little joke with the design review where you saw how much space you have actually in the trunk. Of course, the question comes down, should I buy the M3 sedan, the M4 Coupe or convertible, or the M3 Touring? And it's such a simple answer, honestly, because if I were to live in Europe, I don't see myself buying anything else other than the M3 Touring. Not only because it's such a cool car and because it's the first really M3 Touring that's a production series car, but also because it does everything really, really well. Maybe it doesn't excel, let's say, the driving dynamics as in M3 CS maybe would, or maybe the M4 CSL, but this is a car that could be fun and also comfortable driving. So I don't see why you would buy the M3 CS with a 4-door over this 4-door also wagon, because you're getting the best of both worlds and you're having this benefit of being able to transport a lot more things with you. Now, if you were to take the cars on the Nürburgring, maybe you would be able to be slightly faster with the M3 sedan. But then again, that's something that only pro drivers and maybe the extreme drivers will ever do. So the answer is actually quite simple. You should definitely buy the M3 Touring if you live in Europe, because you're also never gonna be able to buy this car. This is the last generation M3 that's not gonna be electric. The next M3 will come out around 2027, 2028, and it's going to be fully electric. There is very little doubt about that. So if you wanna own a piece of history, if you wanna have a car that will probably become a classic one day, despite that controversial kidney grille, I truly believe that this car will be a classic in the next 20 years, maybe even faster than that. So you shouldn't be surprised if you go into the BMW museum in the next 20 years and you will see this car among the greatest cars ever made by BMW, because the engine in this car is marvelous. It's got a fairly decent design aside from the controversial front grille, and it's a car that will definitely be appreciated as being a proper driver's car and a car that has a gasoline engine. I'm not saying that the next generation M3 and probably M3 Touring also wouldn't be fun, but it's going to be electric. It's not going to have this noise that you get from this engine. And speaking of that, this is not your typical M3 and M4 noise, because if you live in the US, you know that we don't have the OPF, and essentially the European version of the car, it's a little bit neutered. It doesn't sound as good, and you're not getting the same blurs that you're getting from the US cars. So keep that in mind. If the sound is a little bit different, it's because of the OPF filter that's in Europe because of the regulations they have here. So going back to the classic, absolutely, this is a no-brainer. There is a reason why BMW just announced recently that they're trying hard to keep up with the production demand. And I don't see this car going out of production anytime soon, because if the new M3 is still about 4 years out, I believe this one will have a very long phase or production phase, and I'm sure we'll see a facelift next year. Based on the spy photos that I saw, there is a small update coming out next year. Kidney grille will stay, but there will be small improvements, and there will be also a power bump, and I'm excited about that because my sources tell me that this one will jump from 503 to about 518 horsepower. So even though 15 horsepower might not sound a lot, I truly believe it will make a difference in the driving dynamics of the car. You know, speaking of driving dynamics, once again, as you can see, once you push the car and it gets past that RPM band, it will start to deliver the full torque, and it becomes quite fun. The suspension is a lot harsher right now because I'm in the Sport Plus mode, so I'm getting a lot more bounciness from the car, but that's the trade-off. That's exactly what I want to see from the Sport or Sport Plus mode. This bounciness on the road, this rigidity, this stiffness, which makes the car feel like a true race car, or maybe like a car that you can take on the track. Steering wheel is still a little bit softer than I would like. I mean, you have to really handle the steering and have a lot more inputs than you would in the, let's say, an older BMW M car. But then again, it's just me complaining about this. A lot of the customers don't really care about this. And if you're trying to replicate maybe the Porsche, you know, type of steering, you wouldn't be able to do, because they're very different brands when it comes to the approach for sports cars or for track-oriented cars. So for what it is, it's actually not bad at all. It's something that I can live with, especially if it's in an M3 Touring packaging, because then I can overlook some of the shortcomings from the car. Speaking of shortcomings, there really aren't too many. It's, in the end, if there is something that you don't like about the M3 or M4, then that's going to apply for the M3 Touring. But overall, this is exactly what you would expect to see from the M3. It's got a fairly premium package inside. You can also customize it, like I said, from the carbon bike seats to M Sport seats to different type of leather. Of course, the trim can be changed as well. So it's your typical luxury premium car that you would get from BMW M. It is not cheap. It sells for quite a nice penny in Europe, but you are getting a good car for that money. So even if I want to nitpick anything on this car, other than the steering, maybe feedback not being up to my standards, because I'm coming from the 1M and I had a chance to drive that recently, there isn't really much to complain about this car. And here is another cool story that I've just heard recently, another rumor. We might be finally seeing an M3 CS Touring. So The CS models have been quite popular with BMW. We've seen that in the previous generation, now with this one as well. And I've heard that BMW is strongly considering an M3 CS Touring. So if that comes to market, then that will become the M car to get, because it's going to be a lot more dynamic than this one. It's going to have the same DNA or the same driving traits as the regular M3 CS and the future M4 CS. BMW has always managed to make small adjustments to the CS models by simply tuning the software and giving the car a different character. So let's see what happens the next few years, but I have strong beliefs that we will see that car on the road. In the meantime, you shouldn't be waiting for that. So without rambling too much, this was a quick review of the BMW M3 Touring. If you do have the option to import this car to the US as a show on display car and you have the means, the financial means, I would say do it. Not only because you're going to be one of the few selected ones that have this car in the US, but if you don't drive too much every year, then you can actually take advantage of that limit imposed by the show on display car. And I promise you, if you go to any Cars and Coffee meets or any other car meets, everybody will probably stare at this car. Even here in Germany today, driving around, I've seen some people looking at the car quite a bit, because probably there are not that many on the road yet. And it's still a very unique product. So props to BMW M for building this car. I know they get a lot of flack or a lot of hate for building the XM, for example, but sometimes they do surprise us, and this was a huge surprise when we went out last year, because no one really expected this car. So with that being said, this is the BMW M3 Touring live from Germany. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.